When you think about the pieces that are memorable, whether it's a scene in a film or a commercial, they're memorable because they made you feel something, right? And it elicits a reaction and an emotion, and that's why they stick with you. Like, these are the pieces that kind of stay with you the longest.
I work in the Olympics unit, and we always say, make me care. With a lot of these athletes, unfortunately, people only pay attention every 4 years when the Olympics kick around. So we find ourselves having to reintroduce all of these characters. So for example, there's a pole vaulter out of Atlanta she's one of the top in the world. How do we make people care about this pole vaulter? She has 12 pets at home, okay? She's got an iguana, she's got snakes, she's got dogs, as well as her husband, who's also her coach, built her a pole vault setup in her backyard. And she documented all of this on social media. You know, so it's like finding a way to make people care about these athletes different than the other big four sports which are a lot more popular in our culture these days.
I mean, it sounds like you humanize them, right?
Absolutely.
Like, you just find a relatable thing. 12, I mean, no judgment, but 12 animals is a lot of animals to have.
Yeah.
It's a little too much. But
also, you want to know more about it?
Absolutely.
What are the other 12? What are the other 11?
What are their names, right?
Of course. And then even the building the apparatus in the backyard, I mean, that feels like really human, right? We're all doing DIY things, right? Like, we're all living very normal human lives, and those athletes, though they're on a big stage, they're all humans as well, and that feels incredibly relatable, right? And it feels authentic, and I think the authenticity is critical, right? I think we've all become familiar with that, right? Like, we're all looking at each other, like talking on our phones with each other, right? Or stories that we're putting up. We're expecting authenticity probably before any other generation of media consumers ever has before.
Well, I think, obviously, hanging on every word that you were just saying about that story, but I think it also illustrates a great point, is that you yourself are a great storyteller. And I think, like, all of us here are storytellers in our own right. So, like, if you're a good storyteller and you're engaged, you were engaged, then that's going to come through on your final piece.
And also, a story like that, like, resonates with everybody. Like, everybody can resonate with a beautiful love story like that. And I think when you're thinking about these nonprofit clients, that's what we want, right? We want people to be engaged. We want people to get involved. We want to help amplify their message.
Yeah. Oh, and to your point about the idea of talking about authenticity, I think the idea of, like, an organic connection. And as you said before, talking about the pole vaulter that had the setup in the backyard that then led to the idea of, like, the pets and just that sort of connection, it's not a weird stretch. It's connected to their passion. So of course, these are the stories and the things that would then encompass that whole story. And I think it does tie back to authenticity because it's so organic to their being and the nature of them.
It's getting into the weeds, but maybe it's good to discuss, right? Like, I think your edit mechanics, for lack of a better term, right? Like, what does your edit look like, right? How dense is your edit? How much footage do you have, right? What dictates how much footage is in your edit is obviously what you have available, but you don't put everything in, right? You're being really conscious of the choices about what you're actually including. But in a 30-second spot, I mean, how much footage can you really jam in? In some ways, a lot. And maybe if your 30-second PSA feels a bit like a really kind of anthemic sizzle, you might have that thing pretty jam-packed. You want, like, staccato, right? Many cuts, right, to keep the energy up. Or maybe it ought to feel a bit more, I don't want to use the term emotional, but just a bit more sentimental, right? You're probably going to be using a little bit less footage, let things breathe, let things space out, right? And in the same way, you might be doing the same thing with your music, both your music selection and also your music edits. Right, so on your bigger, louder, sizzly, anthemic pieces, your music will marry that, and you'll probably find in that music moments in the music where there's crescendos or just flatter parts of the bed, and you'll layer that against your edit to create those motions as well.
And practically, music is the first thing.
Sure.
Lay down the music first, and then everything comes afterwards. So make sure that you have a piece, the cut of music that everyone's happy with, and you think fits the tone, the theme, a nice lyric punch if there's space in the piece can really help tell the story.
Sure. I mean, even something as simple as what is the format, right? I mean, take that for granted, but is is there narration in the piece? Maybe the piece is narrated, right? Maybe it's not narrated at all. Maybe it's literally a silent like sizzle, right? And you literally are just cutting between, let's say, sports footage with like some sort of aggressive beat behind it, and there's really just like a tag at the end, right? Like it could be, I guess, structured a number of different ways. And the most recent lab piece we were working on was narrated by an alum of the nonprofit, and his I guess the passion in his voice, the emotion in his voice, didn't feel like we hired a scripted actor. It felt like we hired someone who knew and cared about the nonprofit, and it felt familiar. You could imagine him being a part of the nonprofit. He doesn't say it explicitly, but it's not a stretch for the imagination, and I think that helped create an emotional connection there.
Yeah.
Creating an emotional connection is crucial because that is what is going to help drive engagement and support.